Hello and welcome to CX Today. My name is Charlie and today I'm joined by two enterprise communications experts to dissect the inaugural Gartner Magic Quadrant for CPaaS. Yesterday I am joined by Dave Michaels, lead analyst at TalkingPointz, and Rob Kurver, founding partner of the CPaaS Acceleration Alliance. Thank you both very much for joining me, and let's kind of get right into this Magic Quadrant. And to start, I'm going to pop up the Magic Quadrant matrix onto the screen for all our viewers. As you can see in the top right-hand corner, you have Gartner's market leaders. In the top left-hand corner, you have the challengers. In the bottom right-hand corner, you have the visionaries. And in the bottom left corner, you have the niche players. And these positions are on this matrix. Gartner has kind of placed these vendors on the matrix based on their ability to execute and their completeness of vision after kind of a big evaluation process. So yeah, lots of possible ways we can take this conversation. But maybe first I'll pass over to you, Dave, just kind of for your top takeaways from the report.
I thought it was a really interesting report. It's CPaaS, I guess you could say, has been around for 15 years since Twilio founded itself and more or less created the category. And so it's nice that Gartner acknowledged that sector. And I was thinking about this after the CPaaS event last week in Amsterdam. It seems like, over the past 15 years, it's an overnight success. What do you think of that, Rob?
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's a testament to the growth of the CPaaS market and business, right? That CPaaS now comes out with the first Magic Quadrant. They did market guides and things like that before, but this is the first MQ, and we all know, well, everybody loves the Magic Quadrants. And I think, this follows what IDC did a couple of months ago with their MarketScape. The business is getting more serious attention from the analysts. We had a couple of really good analysts last week at our event in Amsterdam, the inaugural CASA 23. So it's definitely a space that more and more people are following.
So one of the things that I thought was interesting about this report, Charlie, is that it's a more diversified report than most Magic Quadrants. This one really. I think there was 13 vendors or providers in the report, and let's see, I made a little list here. 13 providers representing 8 different countries. We don't normally see that actually in our sector in communications. That kind of diversification, so that's really impressive. U.S. had 4 providers in this report. The second place, I guess, would be China with 2 providers, but we saw, Netherlands, Norway, India had 2, Sweden, Switzerland, UK. Very diversified for a Gartner Magic Quadrant. And I think that's actually what's really exciting about this space is it is creating a new set of opportunities. There's a little bit more of the Wild West than, say, UCaaS or CCaaS, which has very well-established leaders. Now, I say that with the exception of Twilio. Twilio came out on the top right of this one. And again, I said they more or less created the category. So they are kind of, everyone, but they have a lot more dots in their rearview mirror than they ever had before. So I think it's a really interesting space.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting. Not a big surprise that Twilio is in the upper right corner, right? But I was surprised to see Infobip really close, and
Yep.
Vonage as well. So I think, and for different reasons, right? These 2 companies are doing some interesting things. I think Infobip for a long time was the best kept secret in the world of CPaaS. But they're really, really big. They work with their partners, with telcos, everything. Vonage, of course, now part of Ericsson with a very interesting telco play. So yeah, I think it's getting crowded there around Jeff.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of those companies I do want to pick up maybe a little bit on is Vonage. I saw last week, actually, they had this really kind of interesting announcement in terms of Ericsson and Deutsche Telekom kind of partnered up to release network APIs. That could have quite a big impact on their CPaaS offering too. Do you think that's maybe something to watch out for, maybe in next year's CPaaS Magic Quadrant? Maybe Dave, I'll go to you.
Well, it's actually really similar to E&, is that how we say it, out of Dubai? They presented last week in Amsterdam, and they said they wanted to have best-in-class CPaaS, and so they were partnering with both Vonage and Twilio. And I think that's an interesting model because for years, providers just said, we're going to build it instead of partner. And so Vonage has more or less replicated that model with T-Mobile, Deutsche Telekom, and I think it's a great model. I think that that's really good for Vonage. I think it's really good for T-Mobile. It's not the same T-Mobile as T-Mobile US, different T-Mobile, but I guess it's the original T-Mobile, the T-Mobile. And I think that's great news. I think that was very interesting. And to Rob's point, I before seeing the report, I just kind of imagined Twilio and Vonage would be in the top right. Very surprised at how strong Infobip showed up on this report. And Sinch did also really well. And a couple of names that we often talk about, Cisco did pretty well, Bandwidth did pretty well. And then there's a lot of names on here I don't really know very well. And I'm really anxious to learn a lot more about them. And I think Gartner highlighted that regional differences are really important in CPaaS because of language issues, cultural issues, regulatory requirements. And so where Gartner tends to try to find these big mega players that work for any region, any country, it's nice that they did a hat tip to understanding that this particular market, you may need to work with a regional provider as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Dave. I mean, this is the top 13, right? And then there's another probably couple hundred that are gearing up, more regional, smaller, not meeting Gartner's guidelines yet, but there's a lot of dynamics in this space. And going back to the telcos, we see Deutsche Telekom, we see Proximus just acquiring Route Mobile, right? Not so long ago. We see Infobip works with, for example, BT. So you're starting to see more and more of these collaborations between a CPaaS player and a telco or multiple telcos. And it's clearly why Ericsson shell out $6 billion for Vonage last year, right? That was a big bet. They have a lot riding on that. The potential of doing this whole telco API play is huge. There's so much more to CPaaS than messaging, right? For years and years, we thought CPaaS is messaging, but now it's clear also from the Gartner report. It's about voice, it's about IoT, it's about mobile, it's network APIs. There's so much more, of course, video. There's so much more going on in the world of CPaaS, and you see that the telcos are starting to become active in different ways. They feel that they have an opportunity here.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Rob. You mentioned the Gartner requirements. So, Gartner has inclusion criteria to be in the report, and these are the vendors that met those inclusion criteria. But it's by no means an exhaustive list. I think you said hundreds of other providers out there. It's pretty hard to find a cloud provider today in communications that is not, got some sort of API or CPaaS credential in some way. One thing I really like about this report, and I'm generally pretty pleased with this report, but I like that they define CPaaS. I think they did a pretty good job of defining CPaaS because it's a tough one. People use the term a lot, and it can be a little confusing. And they broke it into a core set of requirements and a optional set of requirements. And so, the core set of requirements, surprise to no one, SMS, voice calls. When I say voice calls, placing, making, routing, voice calls, service support, onboarding, that kind of stuff. And so that makes great sense. And that's where, certainly the sector started and got a lot of attention. And a lot of players are in that space. There's a lot more if that was the only inclusion criteria. They also had some additional, to make it in here, you had to have a couple more things. And they didn't specify what they had to be. They said, one of these things, and maybe, that kind of list. But it shows where the space is kind of going. And like Rob just mentioned with Vonage, mobility, IoT, eSIMs, these kind of fall into the advanced categories. And I really like that. And I was also really interested in how they played up the integration with services like WhatsApp and Viper, and I think that's becoming incredibly important. I've been to 3 European events now in the last 2 weeks, and WhatsApp comes up at every single one of them. WhatsApp is so much more predominant in Europe than it is in the U.S., and it's just incredibly critical to have WhatsApp into your customer engagement story and stuff like that. And so a lot of these CPaaS providers could deliver that. I think that's so it's nice to see that optional core set and optional set of capabilities to help define the space. I thought that was actually pretty good.
Yeah, and I think I was actually surprised a little bit by it. It said you must kind of have the voice capabilities, you said, in SMS and one other messaging app. I was maybe surprised to see it only kind of be one, maybe not to kind of put an integration with WhatsApp or something like that as maybe a mandatory field. But it is, as you say, it's a space which is difficult to define. I think, as you said, Gartner did do a good job of doing that. In terms of the actual vendors, again, you both mentioned there's like maybe hundreds out there. I don't know, Rob, if there were any kind of vendors that you think you were surprised not to see maybe in this quadrant and that you would expect to see maybe in the coming years.
I'm a little bit biased here from the Netherlands, but I was kind of surprised not to see CM.com because for me, they're pretty much in that same league as MessageBird, right? And they have some really interesting financial API plays. And Enterprise was mentioned already. I mean, they made it into the IDC marketscape a couple months ago as one of the top 23. Well, this is only the top 13, right? So it's only logical that not everybody's in here. And there's so many regional players, I would say, that I'm sure are dying to be in next year's edition. I don't know if the next edition will be next year, really, because this one was a long time in the making, I think. But hopefully we'll.
Typically, they're annual once they start making one. So it took a long time to make the one, but now they should be on a recurring basis.
So it'll be very interesting to see what happens next year, as a lot of these providers and players are going to try and catch up, and see what the way is to get to the top right.
The one that I was surprised wasn't on here, and it's just a function of inclusion criteria. They didn't meet one requirement. We don't know which one, or at least one, I should say, is AWS. I thought AWS Chime SDK would have the volume and global reach and the typical requirements that they have in the inclusion criteria. So for whatever they obviously missed at least one of the criteria. So, but that was a surprise for me.
Yeah. And then the same could be said for Microsoft, of course. Although ACS is a little bit younger, so maybe they didn't meet all the criteria. Yeah, so
that did not surprise me, actually. I think Microsoft's got basically that core set of capabilities in there that they don't really expand into that optional yet. They will.
Well, yeah, they will, and it'll be interesting to see what happens a year from now. So what do you think about Avaya, Dave?
Well, Avaya, they launched a CPaaS offering a while back. They called it Spaces. And that's one of the areas that they've cut back on in their transformation and Chapter 11 process. Alan at Avaya says that, we're not only going to say what we're going to do, but we're going to say what we're not going to do. And so I think Spaces is still got a lot of capabilities, but they're not positioning it as a CPaaS anymore. They're positioning it as APIs to their products and services. And so I think that's a good place for them to be right now. So yeah, Avaya didn't surprise me not being on this. RingCentral's got a pretty good offering. A lot of the contact center companies like Five9 and 8x8, they have a lot of good CPaaS capabilities, but apparently they just didn't meet. And a lot of those companies are very targeted to a specific niche and may not meet the requirements that Gartner's looking for in a much broader use case. But if you look at the list of the vendors on here, it's actually quite surprising to me. And not only is it really surprising because I don't know all these vendors, because I like to say I know all the vendors, but not only do I not know all these vendors, but and I mentioned how they are from different countries and diversified. They're also diversified on the graphic itself. We've got let's see, it's got 4 leaders. What's that bottom right? It's visionaries, 4 visionaries. So 4 and 4, that's equal. 3 in the niche quadrant, that's almost equal, and then 2 in the challenger quadrant. I mean, this is a pretty well-rounded group of providers. And so it's exciting. If I was a Gartner analyst writing this report, I'd be pretty excited about this first report. The first MQ is always the funnest because moving these dots is a bitch, and so you get to place them for the first time, and that's the fun part. But they have a lot of controls internal that moving a dot, you got to pass a lot of criteria, a lot of scrutiny. So, but I would be pretty pleased with this report, and I can't wait to learn a lot more about some of these vendors and so.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's interesting to me as well. We've talked about the little bit of the market headwinds in terms of kind of the network and the telecom providers kind of coming into this space, maybe to shake it up a little bit, and then the kind of addition of other capabilities coming in, such as the Internet of Things. In terms of kind of looking forward to next year, which vendors do you think really could make a big shift across towards that top right-hand corner? Which ones do you think are best placed maybe to kind of really challenge Twilio and Vonage and Infobip at the forefront of this quadrant?
Well, I would say it's a function of investment, and investment's tough right now in this economy. The free money, as they say, is gone. I miss the free money. I never heard of any free money, but anyway, what the experts say is the free money is gone, and I certainly can't find any free money. So so the companies that have the ability to fund a rich R&D are the ones that are going to pop up. And so the ones that have the rich R&D are the ones that have other forms of revenue and good sources of cash. I would not be surprised to see Amazon in the near future. The U.S. companies like Bandwidth and Cisco, they certainly have the ability to pop up on this if they want to, if they choose to, right? If they choose to.
They choose to.
Yeah. And same with Microsoft, for that matter, as Robert has said. If they choose to, then of course they will. And so really, it's going to be the companies that have the access to the funding. You could be sure that a couple of these companies have a bullseye on them right now. A couple of these dots have bullseyes, and some of them will be either acquired or, a bullseye is not necessarily a good thing because sometimes it just means let's decimate them. And so there's going to be some companies going after some of these positions. So I think the companies with pockets, with deep pockets, are going to be the ones that move up.
And I think Vonage is already in that upper right corner, right? But I'm really looking forward to seeing some more telco wins from them. Deutsche last week was timely, but I was really expecting something sooner, earlier in the year. It'll be interesting to see what happens there and if others will follow suit. I mentioned Infobip, same thing. They're doing work with a couple of the telcos. There's some players from the other part of the world, APAC, companies like Conviva, for example, that are doing a lot of business with the telcos. We haven't heard of them here much. And I think these are accelerators, right? If they do business with if they manage to find a way to make the telcos really successful, that can shake this up really quickly.
Yeah, and one point along that, and you touched on this, Rob, already with Vonage and Ericsson, this report mentioned eSIM, mentioned two-factor authentication, but I think that there's a significant wave of opportunity ahead of us with 5G and mobility that we haven't got to yet. And I think that's what drove that acquisition with Ericsson of Vonage, acquiring Vonage. And so Vonage has been talking about class of service in the 5G network, that being an API for an application, and they've talked about both Twilio and Vonage and Bandwidth have been talking about better forms of authentication and validation. And so I think we're going to see a whole new. They talked about the core set of capabilities and the future set of and the optional set of capabilities. They didn't really talk about the future set of capabilities, and I think that's going to create a lot of interesting opportunity as well.
Yeah, it's also interesting to think about how Vonage can use kind of the CPaaS technology in the back end of their kind of UCaaS platforms and CCaaS platforms too. But I think that's maybe a conversation for a different day, not on the Gartner Magic Quadrant. But I think that's wonderful. There's lots of great insights from both of you. But I think that's the best place to end today's conversation. So thank you very much both for joining me, and thanks to everybody for watching. Bye for now.
Thanks.